The late afternoon sun filtered through my car window, warm and golden, just like the plans Maddox and I had for our future. I had taken the day off work, something I rarely did, to surprise him. We were finally getting serious, talking about leases, decorating styles, and merging closets. It felt like a new chapter. I had even stopped by his favorite bakery to pick up the lemon pie he loved. He didn't know I was coming. That was the point. Driving through our quiet Ohio suburb, I caught myself smiling. This neighborhood would be mine too, soon. Maybe not the most exciting place, but it had good schools, quiet streets, and the kind of charm that made you believe in happy endings. I parked a block away, on instinct. I wanted the element of surprise, and maybe, deep down, I just needed the walk to calm my nerves. Growing up, I was the youngest, always the peacemaker, the one who bit her tongue so others wouldn't fight. My older sister Cambria had the spotlight. I learned early that making peace kept things quiet. But today, I wasn't trying to keep the peace. Today, I was just happy. I let myself into the house with the key Maddox gave me last month. No knock. No warning. That's what being in love does. It gives you a false sense of belonging. I stepped inside and called out his name, but the house answered back with silence. And then a laugh. A woman's laugh. Familiar, sharp, unmistakable. Cambria. I froze. Not because I recognized her voice, but because I recognized the way she laughed, like she had already won. I moved slowly up the stairs. Each creak under my foot felt like it was announcing the end of something I hadn't seen coming. My hands tightened around the pie box. I told myself I was being dramatic, that there could be 100 explanations. But my stomach knew, my heart knew. I reached the bedroom door. It wasn't locked, and when I opened it, I walked into a nightmare I wouldn't wake from. There she was, Cambria. Her hair was messy in the way that isn't accidental, her shirt half off, and Maddox, sitting on the edge of the bed like he'd been caught shoplifting, not shattering someone's life. For a few seconds, nobody moved. My eyes met his first. He looked panicked, like a boy who got caught stealing candy. Then I looked at Cambria. She didn't look guilty. She looked pleased. That silence, it wasn't just awkward. It was cold, heavy, a new kind of stillness I'd never felt before. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a kind of death. And not just of love, but of illusions. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I heard myself think, I wasn't just losing a partner. I was losing my last illusion about family. Maddox stood up, reaching toward me like I might collapse. Cambria beat him to it. "You always get leftovers anyway," she said, smirking, like this had been hers all along and I was late to the realization. That was when I felt it, not the heartbreak, but the insult. Years of being the second choice, the afterthought, the one who understood too much, all distilled into that one sentence. I dropped the pie. The box hit the hardwood floor with a thud. I turned and walked out without another word. The front door slammed behind me, but I didn't hear it. I was already halfway gone. I drove for an hour, maybe more. I didn't know where I was going, and I didn't care. I wasn't crying. I was calculating. Every conversation with Cambria suddenly played on repeat in my head. Comments she'd made about Maddox, jokes that had felt too familiar, the way her hand lingered on his shoulder a moment too long during that dinner 2 months ago. It all made sense now, and I hated how blind I'd been. I remembered the family barbecue when she accidentally spilled wine on his shirt and insisted on helping him clean up in the bathroom. Back then, I had smiled and laughed it off. That was what I always did. That was what they counted on. The real pain wasn't Maddox. It was her. When betrayal comes from blood, it cuts deeper than any blade. Friends can fall away. Lovers can cheat. But sisters, they're supposed to stand beside you, not sleep with the man you thought you'd marry. The lemon pie sat in my mind like a metaphor, untouched, melting, forgotten on Maddox's bedroom floor. Just like me. I ended up by the lake. The water was still, the air quiet. I parked and sat there, staring at nothing, trying to feel something. My value was never in who chose to love me. It was in what I refused to tolerate. That sentence didn't come to me right away. It settled in after minutes of nothingness. It wasn't strength I felt, not yet, but it was clarity. I thought about calling Mom, but I knew what she'd say. Cambria didn't mean it like that. Or worse, you always overreact. So I didn't call. Instead, I thought about what came next. I wasn't going to get revenge. This wasn't about punishing them. It was about reclaiming something they thought they could take. My dignity, my voice. This wasn't the first time I'd been the easy one to blame, the quiet one, the fix-it girl. But maybe this time, I wouldn't play along. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the first they'd done this to. That night, I didn't sleep. I wrote instead, a letter neither of them would ever forget. The ceiling of my apartment felt lower than usual that morning. I hadn't slept. I just lay there, staring into nothing, letting silence sit on my chest like a weight. The kind of stillness that doesn't comfort, it suffocates. My hands were stiff from gripping the pen all night. The letter I wrote still sat on the table, untouched since the final period. But it wasn't anger that woke me. It was the absence of it. Something colder had taken its place. A measured clarity. I considered texting Mom, just to tell her. Not to hear sympathy, I knew better, but maybe to break the silence. Then I pictured her blinking at the screen, shrugging, and texting back something like, "Oh, honey, I'm sure it's not what you think." That sentence alone felt like being shoved into a closet with the door quietly locked behind me. So I put the phone down. Instead, I moved. I made coffee, no sugar. Took a cold shower, dressed in a crisp white shirt, tucked in tight. Not for show, but because order mattered again. Every button felt like armor. I had left some things at the family house. A few books, some old notes, a pair of earrings I hadn't worn in months. That's what I told myself as I grabbed my keys and stepped into the sharp air. But we both knew that wasn't why I was going. The house stood exactly as it always had, stately, Victorian, proud. It didn't look like a crime scene. It looked like home. But stepping onto the porch, I felt like a guest in a museum curated by people who had decided I no longer existed. The door was unlocked, as always. Inside, the scent of lemon polish hung in the air, Mom's signature, her version of stability. But the hallway struck first. I froze halfway in. Photos had shifted. The gallery wall that once held memories now told a different story. Cambria's college graduation photo now hung enlarged in the center. Mine, once just to the right, was gone. Not moved. Gone. My throat tightened, but I said nothing. When they erase you from the wall, they're practicing erasing you from memory. I walked further in. The more I looked, the more I noticed. Photos cropped tighter, corners rearranged. My image dimmed in each frame, as though light had deliberately been drawn away. In the study, I found it. Dad's old binder, the one he used for letters and clippings. I flipped through out of habit, then stopped. A sheet of paper slid loose, my handwriting. It was a vow I wrote for Maddox months ago, back when we were planning to write our own. I had scribbled down something about trust being not just what we build, but what we protect. I remembered the night I wrote it. I pulled out my phone and opened Cambria's live stream from the rehearsal dinner she'd posted the night before. He said it, word for word. "They didn't just steal my fiancé," I whispered aloud. "They stole my words." I closed the binder, not slammed, closed. It wasn't time for rage. It was time to document. I snapped photos, every page, evidence, not memories, not for sympathy, for reclamation. I left the study, walking slower now, collecting every subtle shift like a forensic detective. Near the kitchen, I stopped. The family collage, the one where I sat on Dad's lap, fishing rod in hand, smiling at something off camera, was gone. In its place, a glossy print of Cambria and Maddox at some charity gala. Her hand on his chest, his eyes somewhere behind the camera. The collage wasn't just taken down, it had been replaced. The doorbell startled me. I opened it to find Mrs. Keene from across the street. "Oh, I wasn't sure anyone was here," she said, clutching a Tupperware dish. "Your mother said you'd moved away for good. That's why you're not on the wall anymore." My face didn't move. I nodded, thanked her for the dish, and let the door close softly behind her. So it wasn't just in here. They were rewriting me out loud now. I walked out the front door without looking back, leaned against my car, stared at the house like it was a stranger wearing familiar clothes. My college professor once said, "The truth will set you free, but first it will make you furious." I had always loved the quote. I finally understood it. There's a kind of fury that's quiet, that doesn't need to shout. That fury, mine, was building like steel. They weren't just rewriting the past. I was going to write the future. Back at my apartment, I pulled a fresh notebook from the drawer. On the first page, I wrote one word in block letters: truth. I slid the printed photos inside, one by one, each one a record, each one a refusal to be erased. I sat in my car outside the community hall, phone in hand, staring at the group text forwarded by Aunt Marlene. Family update meeting at 5 p.m. tonight. It wasn't sent to me originally. I only saw it because she felt sorry or curious or both. The message stung more than hearing Cambria laugh. It confirmed what I already knew. I was the outsider. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. Sometimes showing up silent is louder than shouting from the outside. I stepped out and locked my door behind me. I told myself I was going to observe, collect facts, not to plead or beg. But with every step toward that building, my skin felt taut, ready. Inside the hall, folding chairs faced a small stage. The smell of coffee and powdered donuts draped the air like a familiar scent turned sour. The Midwestern space had a modest charm. American flags in corners, low ceiling, soft fluorescent lighting. I entered quietly, eased into the back row. Family members clustered in tight knots. Whispers ceased when I passed. I heard someone murmur, "She came." I gripped my notebook labeled Truth in my lap. Cambria and Maddox walked in together, impeccable and serene. They stood together by the front row, projecting unity. A pastor I recognized from Sunday services acted as mediator. My throat clenched. I remind myself, this public setting is another battlefield. Cambria cleared her throat and began. "Thank you all for coming," she said. Then she dropped the first knife. "We're holding a small engagement blessing tonight, followed by a family discussion." A thin smile played on her lips, a smile that meant control. While the hall accepted it as routine, I knew better. Maddox spoke shortly. "New beginnings deserve shared dreams." He cast me a glance, cold, dismissive, reframing me as the jilted ex, not the betrayed fiancé. I leaned forward, recording discreetly. They were rewriting the narrative in real time. The room nodded along. When I replayed the scene in my mind, I recognized the tactic. Control the microphone, control the story. The sting hit deep, but I stayed silent. I responded not with tears, but with presence. My silence now was not weakness. It was strategy. During a break, Elijah approached, pale and uneasy. "Joy, we've got a problem," he whispered. He handed me an envelope with printed email chains, Cambria coordinating family funds, siphoned into shell accounts. My heart beat fast, but my face stayed calm. "They plan to pin the missing money on you," he said low. Rage and clarity warred in my chest. "They think they're building a wall around me. They don't know I've started digging under it." I slid the emails into my notebook under the page labeled Truth. I sat back, heart racing, lips steady. The meeting resumed. Cambria rose again, voice confident. She began outlining allegations, minor ones, about my behavior as though rehearsed. I stood, interrupting quietly but firmly. "Be careful with your stories. They might not end the way you think." The room snapped silent. Eyes darted between me and the stage. Maddox's face slackened. Cambria's expression faltered for just a heartbeat. I met their gaze, smiled faintly, held my ground. I was no longer the role they wrote for me. The shadows in that hall had gathered, and I had walked into their midst, not to shrink, but to reveal. I drove back to the Blackwood house under cover of dusk, telling myself I was retrieving a few belongings. But the closer I got, the more I felt like I was stepping into a trap. The house sat in the fading light, its windows darkening one by one. The silence greeted me before I entered. Inside, the lights were dimmed. Shadows moved along door frames, the sort of movement you don't notice until it's gone. The house felt less like home and more like a stage set for confrontation. From the foyer, I heard music drifting upstairs, not the old songs Dad and I used to play together. Something cold, generic. My heart jolted. Rooms must have been rearranged while I was gone. I crept forward, thoughts sharp and brittle. It's never just one intrusion. It always comes back, stealthy. At the hallway threshold, I saw light flickering under Cambria's bedroom door. I paused, holding my breath, listening. In the gathering room, the stereo hummed with ceremony background music. I strained for the melody that Mom and I had made, our little playlist of family. It never came. Instead, soft, generic tunes filled the air. I asked Mom quietly, "Where's the music we made for us?" Marceline's eyes flicked up. She said neutrally that the system glitched. But I saw the remote across the room. Playlist settings changed. Someone had tampered. A lie so small felt like betrayal. They silenced my soundtrack the same way they silenced my voice. My gut twisted. I climbed the stairs, careful of creaks. At Cambria's door, I pressed my ear to the wood. Voices behind it, hushed, urgent. I heard them speak about her notes, the binder, the recording. Then one voice, cold and quiet. "Don't let Joey see this email chain." That confirmation cut through me. Cambria was actively trying to erase evidence. I backed away slowly, heart pounding, mind racing, resisting the impulse to pound on the door. Outside in the car, I exhaled against the dark. My fingers traced the edge of my coat pocket, where I kept pieces of my plan. I drafted a message to Elijah and Sable. "I found something. Meet me tonight." I replayed in my mind the playlist settings, matched timestamps, screenshotted anomalies. I rehearsed what I would say, logical, controlled, not melodramatic. I remembered a quote, "Never fight fire with flames, fight it with the blueprint." In my rearview mirror, I saw a silhouette vanish behind a curtain. Before I drove off, I glanced toward the front hallway through a window. Cambria's phone lay on the console, screen lit. The banner read, "Recording, family meeting, draft version." My fingers shook as I picked it up, eyes scanning file names. I slid it into my coat. Leverage. They'd made a mistake in plain sight. Back at my apartment, I set Cambria's phone on the counter like it was a loaded weapon. I didn't unlock it, just watched the black screen glow, then fade. My charger slid into the port with a soft click, and the blue light blinked to life. Power, silence, and a decision I wasn't ready to make. I sat on the edge of my bed, shoes still on, coat still wrapped tight. That meeting kept playing in my head. Their voices, their rewrites, the forced smiles and casual betrayal. I thought about what it meant to be holding her phone, their secrets inside it. It felt like standing on a cliff, and I wasn't sure if jumping meant justice or becoming one of them. I typed a message to Elijah. "I have something. Meet tomorrow." Then I turned the screen face down. It was quiet. I reached under my bed for a box I hadn't opened in years. Dad's journal. The leather binding was cracked, and it still smelled faintly like pipe tobacco. I flipped through the pages until I found the line I remembered. "Silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's complicity." And just like that, I was 12 again. Cambria had cheated on a school poetry contest. I knew. I saw her swap her entry the night before. I kept quiet because Mom said, "Let it go. She's under pressure. Don't stir things up." I never forgot. I played the voicemail on Cambria's phone. A voice, muffled but familiar. Maddox. "Make sure she doesn't see the bank records. That's the only loose end." Loose end. That's what I was to them. I opened my laptop, started a new folder, dragged in screenshots, voice memos, photos, labeled it Truth Insurance. Every click steadied my breath. I poured myself coffee, black, sat staring at an empty email draft to my mother. Just her name in the to-line felt heavy. Typed, "If you knew what they've done, would you still choose them?" Deleted. Typed again. Deleted. My hands trembled. There was no version of this where everyone came out clean, but I was done being the one bleeding just to keep peace. I slid the phone into my purse, not to return it, to present it when the moment mattered. I called Elijah, left a message. I'm in. Let's do this right. Tomorrow. I stood by the window. The glass was cold. My reflection blurred against the streetlights outside. A woman split in two. One part still clinging to the old roles, one part ready to burn them down. Let them call me bitter, a villain. I'd rather be accused of fury than erased by silence. Grandma used to say, justice is never polite. It knocks when the lies get too loud. I spent the next hour organizing everything into slides, bullet points, timeline. Quotes. My version of going to war. And just as I clicked save, a knock came at the door. Not rushed, not timid, just slow and deliberate. I opened it an inch. My mother stood there, eyes red, a manila folder clutched in both hands. We need to talk, she whispered, before it's too late. I didn't move, just felt the flash drive in my pocket pressing into my palm. Elijah's law office smelled of old leather and wood polish. I walked in carrying Cambria's phone, my binder of proofs, and a quiet dread. He motioned me into a chair behind his massive desk. The soft hum of the air conditioner, the click of a pen, made everything feel clinical. He laid out the documents, bank transfers, shell account trails, email chains. Every irregularity now made sense. He looked me in the eye. They're more coordinated than you think. They've done this before. My pulse stuttered, but I nodded. He proposed a trap. We'd force their response through a staged confrontation, not an ambush, but a decoy to draw them out. I bristled. I won't be their pawn, I said, but I'll be the one who flips the board. Elijah paused, then dropped the bomb. Twist S9. Cambria may have already transferred sizable funds in my name, framing me beforehand. My stomach clenched. This wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure. Back in my apartment, I moved like an operative preparing for battle. I slid small recorders into picture frames behind books, printed documents from the shared bank account, just enough to provoke, not overexpose. Years of financial help from Cambria replayed in my mind, disguised favors that locked me into debt, into silence. I remembered a line from therapy. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. I scrawled it on a sticky note and slapped it beside my computer. I stared at it until the words felt like steel. Then my phone buzzed. Melody, an old friend, warned me. Cambria was preparing a smear campaign, online, timed, twist S10. My jaw tightened. The trap had started to bite her back. Later, almost dusk, Cambria showed up at my door. We need to talk, she said softly. I let her in, calm, composed. I didn't show my hand. Instead, I asked pointed questions. About the bank statements, the voicemail, who had the binder. She dodged, shifting weight, weaving soft guilt trips. Don't make this harder than it has to be for us all. I stood steady. If you're so sure I'm wrong, you won't mind if I show this to Elijah. The smile froze on her lips. Unbeknownst to her, a recorder hidden in a photo frame caught her muttering, "She always ruins everything when she gets smart." Her face blanched. The tension in the room thickened. She realized I wasn't bending tonight. Finally, I draw the line. You don't get to use me as your shield anymore, I said, handing her a flash drive. Consider this your copy. I have more. She lunged verbally, threats hot on her tongue. You'll regret this. I cut her off. You already made sure I regret everything. The door shut behind her as she left. In that click, I felt something shift. The air in my apartment felt different. I texted Elijah. We're moving to phase 2. Let them play their next card. My hands shook as I watched lights blink outside. Midnight arrived. My phone lit up. A video posted in a family group chat. Thumbnail, my face. Caption, the real joie. The sister I protected you from. I swallowed. My hand hovered over the screen. Then I refused to flinch. The street outside their house was quiet when I parked along the curb. I'd told myself it was just a drop-off, nothing more. A bag of forgotten items as my excuse. But the air tasted like the night before a storm. I slipped in through the side door, a small flashlight cupped in my palm. The hallway smelled of wax and lemon cleaner. Shadows stretched long under the dim bulbs. The photos that used to greet me felt like a crowd that had turned its back. Bare nails stuck out where frames once hung. My fingers brushed over them. Every step felt like trespassing inside a stranger's life. Every inch of this place, I thought, is a memory someone else is repainting. I breathed in, slow, steady, and kept moving deeper into the house. In the hallway, my light caught a familiar frame, empty. The collage of my childhood fishing trips with Dad, birthdays, little victories, gone. Next to it, a new portrait, fresh from the printer. Cambria and Maddox, grinning like a campaign poster. And the frame glinted under the weak light. I traced the edge, remembering my father and me arranging those collages together, naming each photo like we were pinning down time itself. This was no accident. This was an execution. I pulled out my phone, snapped a silent picture, then stepped back. Anger curled in my chest, hot but controlled. They wanted me erased. I was turning that into evidence. I moved down the stairs into the basement music room. The air cooled, smelled faintly of dust and old sheet music. This was where Dad and I used to play. I opened the piano bench, expecting our song, the sheets we'd scribbled notes on, the USB that held the recording. Nothing, just blank paper stacked neatly. I checked the shelves, the drawers. The playlists on the stereo upstairs had already been scrubbed. Now this. My throat tightened. I sat at the piano, placed my hands on the silent keys, and in my head, the melody played anyway. Even without the notes, I could still hear us. Yet they could pull files, delete songs, swap frames, but they couldn't crawl inside my memory. I went to the far corner of the basement and sat against the wall, phone in hand. Scrolled through the photos I'd taken. The replaced portrait, the missing sheet music, the hollow bench. Each one a piece of the case. A quote flashed in my mind, one I'd underlined in a book years ago. When you rewrite the past, make it your courtroom. That was the plan now. Not a tantrum, a claim. They could delete my face, but they couldn't delete my evidence. I steadied my breath. Tomorrow wasn't about confronting anymore. It was about presenting the truth on my terms. I climbed back up the stairs, bag in one hand, flashlight off now. The house was quieter than it had any right to be. As I crossed the portrait hallway, a sound stopped me. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. I turned, a silhouette in the doorway, phone glowing in her hand. Cambria. Her voice, soft but edged like a blade. You think you're the only one who remembers? I didn't step back. My heart pounded, but my feet planted. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a guest in my own house. I was ready. The invitation came folded inside a church bulletin, Marceline's handwriting at the bottom. Family gathering, Saturday afternoon. No hint of why, no apology, just a date and a time. Elijah had told me to expect this. They'll call it reconciliation, he said on the phone, but it's a stage. Bring what you've got. Don't fight to destroy them. Fight to reveal them. I stared at the pile of flash drives and printed screenshots spread across my kitchen table. This wasn't about being heard anymore. It was about being undeniable. I chose a simple outfit, hair tied back, no jewelry, calm, not combative. Rehearsed my points in the mirror until my voice came out even, almost quiet. At the hall entrance, Marceline met me with a smile so stiff it looked carved. "We're so glad you came," she said. Behind her, Cambria whispered to Maddox, eyes darting toward me like a signal was being passed. The community hall smelled of cheap coffee and floor wax. Folding chairs set in rows, a few tables covered in donuts, small-town decor trying to look official. Elders from the church sat near the front, family grouped in clusters, murmuring. I walked past them without slowing, found a seat near the back, binder on my lap, phone recording already running. Marceline opened with a prayer about unity, then her tone shifted. "We're here," she said, "because sometimes we must confront lies before they become family folklore." My stomach tightened. I didn't move. She turned her eyes toward me. "My youngest has been telling stories," she went on, "and I fear she's been using sympathy currency." The word hung in the air. That was the first stone. I didn't flinch. Cambria rose, clasping her hands, voice sweet. It breaks my heart to say this, but Joey has struggled for years. Therapy sessions, instability. We tried to protect her. Some nods from the crowd. I stayed still, slipped my hand into my bag, felt the cold edge of the flash drive. I walked to the front without asking. My voice didn't rise. You've all heard their version. I'd like you to hear mine. I handed the flash drive to the pastor, asked him to play it on the projector. Marceline's face tightened, but she said nothing. The first clip rolled. Cambria's voice caught in my apartment. She always ruins everything when she gets smart. A hush fell. Next, Maddox's voicemail, the one about isolating me from the estate. Make sure she doesn't see the bank records. The murmurs turned to gasps. People shifted in their seats. Then the last clip. Marceline's voice, coaching Cambria. If she ever grows a spine, you stick to the script. The sound of my own mother plotting landed like a hammer in the room. I spoke after the silence, steady as a metronome. That's not revenge. That's context. Marceline lunged for the mic. This is manipulated, she said, her voice sharp. Out of context, Elijah stepped forward from the back row, phone raised. Metadata verified, timestamps match, he said. The crowd began to peel away from her. The church elders whispered to each other. Maddox bolted first, muttering under his breath. Cambria followed, eyes blazing. You think this wins you love? She hissed at me on the way out. They'll still hate you. I looked back at the rows of faces. I'm not here for your love, I said. I'm here for the truth I was never allowed to speak. I handed back the mic, closed my binder, and walked toward the door. The hall stayed silent behind me, like a room after a fire alarm. Outside, the sky was bright but cold. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. A new message. You may have won today, but we're not done. See. I locked the screen, breathed in until my chest stopped shaking, and whispered into the wind. Then bring everything. The hall was nearly empty when I finally stood up. Folding chairs were askew, coffee cups abandoned, voices fading down the corridor. The air had that hollow echo after a storm, like even sound didn't trust the space anymore. My feet felt heavy but steady as I walked toward the exit, binder under my arm. This was done, or at least the part I could control. Elijah caught up with me halfway down the hallway, his hand landing firm on my shoulder. They can't undo what they just showed the world, he said quietly. I nodded, though my stomach knotted. Relief sat next to fear, and both felt strange. This is just the beginning, I murmured back. We stepped into the night together, the community center lights dimming behind us, shadows long on the pavement. For a moment, I let myself breathe. The fight had happened. Now came the living with it. Home greeted me like a room I'd borrowed, not one I owned. I shut the door, set the binder on the table with deliberate care, closing not just a file, but a chapter. I replayed the meeting in my head, the way Marceline's face cracked when the video played, the way Cambria's eyes flickered and then went blank. My phone buzzed once on the counter. I didn't check it. I needed a second of stillness. Then came a knock. Slow, hesitant. My heart tripped. I opened the door to find my father, Alaric, standing there, holding a small framed photo against his chest like a fragile object. He didn't speak at first, just stared at me with the same eyes from that photo, the echo frame from years ago. My breath caught. After all the noise, this silence felt louder. He stepped forward, extending the frame. I never forgot you, he said, voice rough. Even when they made me forget. It was the original family picture I'd found in Chapter 1, but cleaner, edges worn by time, not neglect. My fingers trembled as I took it. Proof that at least one person had kept something real. You could have told me, I whispered. His eyes filled but didn't break. I should have, he said. Behind him, Elijah waited on the sidewalk. Neighbors slowed their walk to glance over. This was not a reunion. It was a reckoning. The frame's weight settled into my palms like a key. For the first time in years, I didn't feel erased. I sat at the kitchen table with the photo in my lap, Alaric across from me. No tears, just a calm so deep it almost felt foreign. I opened my laptop and began drafting a public statement. Not an attack, not anymore. A reclamation. This belongs here, I said quietly, tapping the photo's edge. Not hidden. I told him I would sell my share of the property, move on clean. I'm not bitter, I added. I just need a life without their fingerprints. He nodded, understanding something in me he hadn't before. In my head, a voice surfaced, mine, but older. I caught them, but then I caught myself, learning to live beyond the betrayal. At dawn, I stepped outside, the photo tucked under my arm. The sky was soft and breaking open, light spilling across rooftops. I breathed deep, cold air cutting and clear. This is my life now, I said under my breath, without apologies, without erasure. In my ears played a new playlist, the song I'd once recorded with my father, finally restored. It was just a melody, but it felt like ground beneath my feet. I smiled, not in triumph, but in release. My phone lit up in my pocket, a message from Cambria. I see you, and I'm sorry this took forever. I stared at it for a long moment, then looked back at the horizon. Maybe this wasn't the end, but it was the first day of someone new.